is Rich O'Brien, and I'm your host. We're excited to share some thoughts on how Bales can help improve some of the processes and minimize downtime. Our speaker today is Rich Wozniak. He has decades of experience in the industry. No need to mute your mics. We encourage verbal questions at any time during the presentation. And feel free to use a chat window if you prefer. We are recording this presentation and we'll share with everyone at the end. And so without further ado, I'm going to pass this over to Rich Wozniak.
Thank you, Rich. Welcome everybody to Bales Metal Surface Solution presentation on Polish Up on Preventative Maintenance. We'll get started here. Just a little background, like Rich had said, been around the block a few times. Been with Bales 6 years and 33 years of experience in manufacturing, from machinist to mold maker, and even running a couple different molding facilities. And then my colleague, Rich O'Brien, who is gonna man the chat and everything behind the scenes, has been with Bales 26 years, pretty much has done a little bit of everything here. So he's well-rounded in what we do here at Bales. Some of the common issues you may see, in the molding process that may affect you down the line or from the get-go, poor output, parts sticking, longer cycle times. Over time you develop an undercut, you have some galling, or you may see some wear spots. Also you start to see, a lot of people nowadays are using soft substrate, whether it be just a non-hardened tool steel or an aluminum, or even, your Mold Max beryllium coppers and those type of things. It may take you longer to, just kind of do some general PM and maintenance, cleaning and just your run of the mill, just kind of making sure everything looks good. Over time, some materials you run may be kind of aggressive to the tool steel and may actually change your finish or your gloss. We'll talk about all of these things and what we can do to help you, and some things to look for, and some ideas that may help you in the long run. You may see an increase in defective parts, in the molding industry, parting line flash. I always go back to the fork scenario. You buy a fork at the Dollar Tree, guess what? You're gonna see parting line flash around those prongs. You buy a fork, maybe say at Kohl's or Target or one of those stores, and it's more of a pristine finish. Those are things, in molding you just look for, parting line flash. Or you may, gate vestige, where you have a big old hunker gate that could be a problem that over time you may get away with your spec. However, you may need to start trimming them. Now you need to add labor to keep those fresh. Things like that. Poor design from the start can be also an issue. You build a tool that has a long core or something with virtually no draft or not enough draft, and now you run into the problems of, part sticking. And then of course there's always, that would never happens, is an engineering change on the resin. You build a tool for just regular, say 6/6 nylon, just basic run-of-the-mill nylon, and now they throw in 30, 35, 40% glass filler, and now your tool can't take the abuse. So these are just some common issues. I know there's a lot more out there. Just wanted to give an overview of some of the things that I've seen in the past and some of the things we see here at Bales, just to kind of keep things rolling here. Some of the solutions we can offer here at Bales to help, in your preventative maintenance or your just kind of upkeep of your tool, is polishing, just to kind of aid in part release or a certain achievable finish. Plating, you're looking at, a nice part release, or you have some corrosion protection or abrasion resistance, which we'll touch base on a little bit further in the presentation. Or a combination of both, which could easily help you extend the life of your tooling, or also extend the longevity of how long you can run it before you do your scheduled PM or your reactive PM, depending on where you are. I know nobody wants to be reactive, but it does happen. It's real world stuff. Polishing, I'm just gonna, normally we typically go into a lot of details on polishing and plating, but for this presentation, we're just gonna kind of touch base on some of these finishes and then some of our coatings, and then get into the meat of why we're here today. Diamond polishing, you know, is typically your most refined finish, typically on the SPI scale of A1 through an A3. Excellent for like your clear parts and something that's, you know, your headlamps and whatever else you may be molding at the time. Paper finish is typically in your B series from the SPI scale, B1 through B3. Your stone finish is, you know, your C finish, C1 through C3. It's good for just some general, you know, kind of removing cutter lines and things like that, or achieving a certain stone finish. Also, there's dry blast, which is D1 through D3, which goes from a number 11 glass bead to the two different types of aluminum oxide blast. What's nice about the dry blast, especially if you have a non-show component and you may have some areas that may just not look right cosmetically, a nice dry blast with an aluminum oxide will definitely help smooth those lines and give you a refined inner detail. So, or if you even get like you know, during a process, you get a little ding or something, you can easily stone it and then give it a little blast finish, and you would never know that you had that. I mean, those things, you know, do happen on occasion. So some other things too to be thinking about is, you know, plating. You know, we do 2 types of chrome, 4 types of nickel here. The diamond chrome, what's nice about that is the abrasion protection at an 85 Rockwell. Hard chrome, you're typically sitting at tried and true at around 70, 72 Rockwell. It's good all around, food grade coating. Electroless nickel, you're looking at, you know, corrosion protection is the key, especially if you're in a harsh environment. High phos is recommended. So when you're looking to spec out an electroless nickel, make sure if you're looking for corrosion protection, always ask for high phos. Mid phos will give you a good protection, but high phos will definitely be a greater asset to you in certain situations. Nickel-on, which is nickel PTFE, which is one of the early hybrid coatings in the industry, which is great for lubricity and also excellent on your LSR tools and your rubber molds. NIBOR, nickel boron nitride, is the slickest we have with a coefficient of friction of 0.05 or less. What's nice about this, you got a sticking problem, and it's pretty much most resin materials, NIBOR is the way to go. Our diamond EN is electroless nickel with nano-sized flakes of diamond. We have a poke spake option where you could bring that abrasion protection on your Rockwell surface hardness of a 70, which now it's almost as good as hard chrome. But what's nice about the diamond EN, it flows evenly everywhere, where hard chrome, you have to build a conforming anode, and those things can be a little tricky, especially in a deep pocket where it may be missed. And of course, you know, in this industry, the area that's not protected is the one that's going to wear the fastest, and that's where you'll start to see your issues reappear most of the time. Some of the solutions we have here, engineering tolerances for the coatings definitely will help. If you know that you've got some changes in resins or tough materials, you know, building in that tolerance, especially if you have a tight tolerance in a tool, build that in there so then you can get away with maybe a little bit thicker, you know, coating thickness, you know, looking at like 3 to 4 tenths instead of like a 1 to 2 tenths per side. You know, schedule accordingly, especially on new tool builds. It's important that you schedule your jobs, you know, so that you can kind of calculate in the plating time, which is typically 7 days for a nickel product and about 15 to 20 for a chrome product. Just some things to think about. Evaluate. Make sure you're always looking at these tools, making sure that you're on top of it. and staying on top of it, because just want to protect your investment in the long run. Especially if you have some harsh materials, let the coating take the abuse, protect your substrate. I'll probably say that 3 or 4 times throughout this really relatively short presentation, but it's just something to always keep in the back of your head when thinking about a coating or thinking about extending the life of your tool. Repair with coating or finishes for optimal performance. If you want to kind of help increase some cycle time, NIBOR may be the way to go with its lubricity. Now you can easily move some resin a little bit through your cavity or your core details. It's just a little tidbit of information. And maintenance, which we're going to get into. Maintaining your tools. Nothing worse than a tool that's not taken care of. I mean, customers spend thousands of dollars on this equipment, and sometimes they get abused, not only just in the resins you run, but your rogue setup tech with supposed to be using a brass pick, and now he's using a screwdriver to get out a stuck part, to just regular storage where you take the mold out of the machine and you don't fully blow out your water lines, or you blow them out and you let that water sit on your cavity and core detail, you close the mold, and then you just go and put it on the shelf. Well, guess what? You open it up and it's going to be rusty. So some coatings and some just general tips just to keep, yourself, keeping those tools in optimal, so they can just be ready to go when you need to run it, on a day-to-day basis. Also, it's not just for molding areas you need to be aware of, water channels, protect from corrosion. The core you see here in the picture was running in just a kind of a really harsh environment. What we did is we kind of just blasted and plated it for the customer until he was able to make new ones and coat them with electrolyzed nickel to help protect that. Protect your moving parts. Always observe your moving parts, especially the components that move within each other. You ideally would like to have, at least 5 or 6 point difference in Rockwell, just so that they just don't start, galling, once again. And then also, gassing up, some of the materials we run today are pretty harsh. You're not going to stop the gassing from happening, but you need somewhere for that to go. One is, doing a really good job to determine where you need vents, your end of fill vents, and also maybe adding a release coating to help aid in cleaning those type of components. What happens a lot is, you may have to, with a gassy material, run for a couple hours and then have to stop your cycle and clean that tool. Well, nobody wants to do that because, downtime is loss in revenue. If you can extend that with a release coating and now, maybe make it once a shift or even once a day, is huge in, in production where, cycle time is critical and interruption in cycle is key. So just some things just to think about, and I will get into it. Preventative maintenance. Some of the things, just from past experience, hopefully, the molders that are out there, you have yourself a checklist for your mold maker to follow once the production run is completed, and it could be as simple as just separate the mold, evaluate, move on, or it can be kind of really complex where you do a total tear down, where you're taking off back plates, ejector plates, and removing every pin and wiping them off. And especially if you know that you're running some harsh materials and things like that, wear and damage is key. Just kind of keeping an eye on those things. And nothing worse than the mold sits on a shelf and you have an issue when you start up. And communication, is key, making sure that you have that tool prepared ahead of time, and making sure that you can, have it ready to go. Nothing worse than putting in a tool that's been sitting. I speak from experience. I've been on both sides of the fence. I've worked on the molds, and then I had guys that set up the molds when I was a production manager, or operations manager where, hey, Waz, it's not going to run. This mold is nasty. Nothing worse than that, because now you spent the time pulling out the last job and then putting in this job, and then you go to open it, in the press, and now you've got an issue. It's ideal that you check these things. Keeping a shot, a shot tracker is always good. Just like anything, data is good, especially over time. You can, kind of determine where you need to go. Okay, after X amount of runs, we need to pull this and PM this, after you've made your production run, or whatever it may be. And that data is good. Maybe it's 100,000 shots, maybe it's 7 million shots, who knows? But that's something that your mold staff and your production team, especially your setup techs, if you have good communication between your team, it's easily to determine and set up that PM checklist, which is, I swear, if somebody doesn't have that, they're missing out. And it's just, like I said, it can be very simple or it can be very complex, but things need to be looked at, and communication is key. Just a prime example, you're running production, parts are all done, and all of a sudden you notice there's some gate vestige, and now you got to go back and sort through these and do some trimming. Those are ideal communications, or even a checklist item to check. Especially if this, the picture here is supposed to be more of a arc, and you can see it's kind of wonky at the top. So that tells me, it's a little worn, or something may have chipped out, and that's going to reflect on your part. No matter what you're molding, gate vestige, you probably have some sort of tolerance, and it's an ideal that you fix those right away, instead of, once again, okay, let's not look at our gates that closely, put it on the shelf, we go to run it, and now we're running it, we're behind the 8 ball, and now you need to trim every part. And that's terrible, because now either you got to go to, your local supplier and get some nippers or clippers, whatever you want to call them, and now you have to add labor to trim those off. It's as simple as that when you start thinking about how important it is to take care of your tools. And it's, whether it be just, cleaning them with just a simple mold cleaner, or, full-blown denatured alcohol, or whatever it may be. I've seen where you can put in your mold checklist, a dry ice blast, whatever may be. And some areas, some folks use ultrasonic cleaners to clean, some of those rough components. And it's always good to, make sure that when you pull a tool, that you have last shots that go with that paperwork that goes with the tool. So now not only can the mold maker or your maintenance guy or whoever does your mold work is actually looking at, 1, the tool, and 2, looking at the part itself. So now, he may not see it initially on the tool, but when he's taking a closer look at the part, now you can easily see, those types of damage, or, wear, or whatever it may be. Now, like we pointed out early on, a coating will help with certain, aspects, whether or not you're running the rough resins and now you want something for abrasion protection, or if you need something to help with part release. And, the worst thing too is, another thing is, if you're running, you got a cycle going, all of a sudden you stick a part, and now it closes on that part. And if it's, loaded with some sort of insert or something, whether it be a steel or a brass or whatever it may be, it could easily cause damage to your parting line. And these are things, you just want to try to avoid, and just kind of thinking, outside of the box sometimes, just making sure that you protect these tools, because they are an investment and you want them to last, and just keep them in pristine shape. And not only does it helps performance, but it actually, kind of aids in the, the responsibility of taking pride in what you do, especially as a mold maker or a molder, that, hey, I run a really pristine part. I'm not running, I hate to say it, but dollar store hangers or, forks. I worked at a place where we were running material for hangers, coat hangers for the dollar store, and they were selling them 12 for $1. Okay, well, to make any kind of margin, we were utilizing every scrap material we could in order to manufacture those, and the quality, for what they were was, to me, because I worked at some pristine shops, and, it was kind of embarrassing, but that's what, you pay for. And it's important to notice these things, ahead of time, staying on top of your repairs and making sure that that tool is in great shape. Some things to think about, especially if you have a coated tool, strip and recoat before that problem develops. And the key here is, in that picture there, you can kind of see an area of where that's maybe the plating has worn off, or maybe an area that gas is. And now you start to see it. Okay, it looks a little level, but if you let that go over time with some harsh materials, those 30–40% glass filled resins, now you're going to start to kind of dish that area. And what happens is now you have a little bump. And now if you have a flatness call out on your tool, these are things you need to just kind of think about, ahead of time. The worst thing you want is a quality reject, and just staying on top of the tools is key. Areas that, what to look for, typically around the gate, across from the gate, your end of fill. Those areas typically want to wear the fastest. But then again, if you're running a harsh material and you kind of have not a really good squeeze on your part, now your parting line may be a problem with those harsher materials. You'll start to get that rolled edge. And then over time, it's not going to fix itself. It's definitely going to be worse. So it's ideal that you stay on top of those things and just is staying on top of them. Once again, too, you start to see longer cycle time, especially if it's something that's coated, especially with a release coating. And now you start to see those issues again, where it may be sticking a little bit, or things aren't rolling the way they should be. That may be a good indicator that, hey, you may have reached that life of that coating, or even just before you need a PM. These are things, once again, if you're monitoring your shot cycle counter, or even just on your machine, whether the tool has the shot counter, the good old progressive counter, or just you're monitoring your cycles on your machine, that's definitely key. Some systems even tie into a main computer, which actually, ties it all together, whether it be like an RJG system or something like that, but that's beyond this right now. And then your finish changes, not only for the wear, but, those materials that, kind of gas may start to change a little gloss level in an area. And then now you have a relatively matte surface, and now you've got that buildup in that area, and now it starts to shine a little bit. So keep an eye on that. Some customers, some components you could probably get away with, but depends on the end user, whether or not they can accept that, especially, automotive, and those types of things where, surface finish is key, tolerances and all that stuff are critical. Same with medical. I mean, these are all important things to look for. Always communicate. Always communicate. You have to make sure that your team is talking. Not only your setup techs, your production manager are talking with whoever's doing your mold maintenance, whether it be the mold maker or just a general maintenance guy, and communicating those pain points. A lot of times, if there is a problem, I know in my past life, if there was a problem, a lot of times my folks would call me out to the machine and, hey, look at this, what do you think? And then it's kind of the leader's decision to say, hey, let's pull this and get this fixed, or is it cost effective to limp? Typically it's not, but sometimes you're X amount of parts away from completing the order and it doesn't make sense. But those are things each individual business will have to determine on their own moving forward. Kind of storage to production, that's the key there. Like I had said early on with the You pull the mold out, you blow out the water lines. However, he's got the water hoses hanging over the two halves of the mold. You go to close it, and now it's dripped. It will rust, it will corrode, and it will attack. And it's important, especially, to protect from that, whether it be a coating or just making sure that if you're, not using a coating, that you actually, actually blow off or dry, or, depending on if they're going to do the PM right away, if it's something that's going to be pulled out and then worked on right away, it may not be such a big deal. But there are a lot of times where a tool gets pulled, it sits on the shelf or the floor for several days, and several days in certain environments can mean thousands of dollars in repairs, refinishing a surface, especially if you have a high polished surface, your A1 or A3 high polished surface, and now you've got some corrosion started on there. That could be a nightmare, depending on how deep that corrosion has attacked that surface. And the pitting, you may have, go down 5/10 to a thou, depending, just to clean it up, to smooth it out. Once again, it's just important to take the time and, and the energy to, focus on making sure that everything is cleaned properly, and from pulling it out to just putting it on the shelf and doing it. What is nice about this too, say an electroless nickel coating for like your all components, but even your back plates and all your retainer plates and things like that. Now that they're coated, if they do happen to be in a harsh environment, there's some molders that don't run in a climate controlled atmosphere. And I've been in shops before where you're freezing cold in one, and the next one there's so much humidity you can just wipe it off the tools. It's just ideal to just protect those. A thin layer of electroless nickel high phos, a couple tenths per side, and a stack up of a few plates isn't the end of the world. But if it may be, it's something to think about when you're either refurbishing or starting out with a new tool. Maybe just, hey, let's plate all these plates just to protect them. And then it's up to you. Plating does help, but you also got to remember, it's really taking care of your tools. I can't say it enough. Being a mold maker and a molder back in the day, you just have to make sure that you take pride in what you do, take no shortcuts, making sure you're inspecting every component, whether it be down to that 16th knockout pin. If you do a full-blown tear apart, now you're looking at the edges. The worst thing you want is some pin push or something like that, or some flash on a knockout pin. All these things are critical when you're molding, and it's just important that you stay on top of it. I can't say it enough. And if somebody out there happens to need a little help and guidance with kind of a PM sheet, I have some ideas I could probably help with. I don't have the old sheets that I used to deal with, but you can pretty much go through a checklist and put something together that's easy enough for, you pull out the job with a work order, you staple that check sheet to it, and now you're holding your people accountable, and now you're protecting that substrate from abuse moving forward. Once again, preserve your tools is key. I can't say it enough. Cleaning and labor hours, PMs, it's critical, making sure that you schedule that in, whether or not you run 24/7 or whatever it may be. Certain tools, it may have to stop throughout a process to be just kind of wiped down or sprayed or whatever it may be, just to kind of remove some residue, just so you can continue to mold a nice, solid, good part. Also, something to think about, cycle time. You keep these tools in good shape, and you're going to keep running them. They're going to run good for you. Add a release coating like a Nibor or a Diamond EN or even a nickel Teflon. It's definitely going to help that resin move throughout your cavity and actually reduce that cycle time. Now, you could, shaving just a few seconds is huge. We have a presentation also on that, a little video that's, I believe, on our YouTube that you could check out. That's key. in regards to, being able to schedule your PM. If you can run your job a little bit faster without any hiccups, now you can easily schedule in that hour or two for your PM at the end of the day. And then now through the week, you got 5 to 8 hours, maybe 10 hours to actually do some repairs, pull it out, do a quick little PM on it, and then move forward. And once again, staying on top of it also helps with your scrap rate, and making sure that these tools are pristine, the parting lines, the gates vestige, all that good stuff, your surface finish just need to be kind of monitored to make sure there's no changes. If you have a good QC staff, they'll definitely help. But also your techs and even your operators, if you have some good folks working for you, the good operators will say something. Hey, I run this part all the time. Hey, this does not look right. What do you want to do? And then just make note of it. If it's nothing that big, but if it's something over time that may continually get worse, it may be something to stop and take a step back and look at. And if you do coat something, especially with those harsh materials, let the coating take the abuse, save the base material, protect your investment. We can't say that enough. It's definitely out there. These resins that are, once again, fiber filled, whatever is in them, wood filled. We've seen it all, and we've heard it all. Just protect your tools. It's key. Some tips and tricks. Really, when you're cleaning the tools, a mild cleaner, mineral spirits, denatured alcohol. Of course, they have, the slide and the stoner have the mold cleaners, different types of mold cleaners that may help with certain types of resin. Always use a soft cloth. Never use steel wool or Scotch-Brite or whatever, especially if you've got a polished surface or a certain finish. The last thing you want is something may have stuck a little bit and you're rubbing it with a steel wool. It doesn't take very much to distort your surface finish. If you have a high polished surface and you start to see some discolorations, little semi-chrome with a soft cloth, and you just kind of buff that out, whether it's a plated surface or even just a high polished surface on a regular P20 or H13, you could easily shine that back up without really removing anything. It's a good, trick of the trade to keep in your back pocket, just as simple as it's just a tube and just kind of a little light buff, and it works wonders. If for a chance you do have a tool that is actually plated, and you do notice, say we do have some parting line wear, the proper thing to do is, to strip the coating, weld or make the changes and recoat. However, sometimes logistically, depending on where you are and the plater you may use or the welder you may use, sometimes you can easily just kind of machine or stone off that coating that's in that certain area, and then do your welding, do your fluffing or your remachining, whatever may need to be done, and then go back and strip and recoat. It'll save you some time. Do welders like to weld over some certain platings? It may spark funny. They may not like it, but sometimes just to alleviate some just aggravation, just lightly stone. Typically a coating's only a few tenths thick. It's not going to take that much to take it off with an abrasive stone or grinding wheel or even an end mill. Just keep it cool. That's all. I want to thank everybody for their time. Is there any questions out there? I don't know if there's been some going through the chat, but if there's any questions, feel free to chime in and ask me away. Anybody? Any? No? No, nothing?
I don't have any questions in the chat either. Sounds like you did a thorough job there.
Okay, well, I want to thank whoever was on for their time, and if they have any other questions, feel free to give us a call here at Bales, or if you need more information, our website has a lot of information. We're posting some videos, or reach out to either the Riches via email, and we'll definitely be able to help you in that way. Thank you and have a good day.
Thanks for attending.